before?
I've not been. This is my first time, and it's a privilege. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we have a lot of questions for you. But first, Chief, would you mind telling us a little bit about the doctor's work with the SMPD?
Sure. Well, Pastor Joe, as we affectionately call him, is a member of the Police Department's Chaplaincy Corps, and the Corps is a series or a grouping of religious leaders from throughout the community who assist us in upholding that sixth pillar of employee well-being by making sure that they're there to look after the spiritual needs of the men and women of the police department. But of different importance, they're also available, should the circumstances arise, to assist our community members if they need assistance as they're going through difficult times.
Pastor Joe, how did you get involved with the SMPD chaplaincy program?
Well, Chief Seabrooks, and thank you for it, put a call out to all of the clergy in our city and asked us to come to a meeting, a gathering. And it was at that gathering that she put us through a series of workshops and talked a lot about how the police department wanted to reach into community and community of faith, various faith groups. It's just a circle of people that make up our community at large. And out of that, the invite came later to, okay, we want to create a chaplaincy, and we'd be interested in those that would like to participate. And there was various kinds of things. I remember after saying okay, then we had to attend the Community Policing Academy, which was a wonderful experience. We had a lot of fun doing that. And then later post-training for chaplaincy to help not necessarily guide us theologically, but to guide us from a social perspective in how we might better meet the needs of the first responders in particular. And so I signed up.
And here you are.
I said, let's do it. So one of my volunteer things that I do, so yeah.
Well, great. So I want to dig into that a little bit more. So question for both of you, and Chief, maybe we'll start with you. What is the benefit of a chaplaincy program to the SMPD?
Well, we deal with a lot of tragedy as police officers, and, we are typically type A personalities, and, we want to be strong. But it doesn't hurt to have help and to have someone to talk to, because sometimes, a lot of times people don't want to go home and bring the work home, but yet we still need assistance in navigating the vagaries of life, particularly given the things that we come into contact with. So it was my thinking that however we do that, and reaching across faith lines, as Pastor Joe said, we have different faiths in the organization. Our chaplaincy represents that. We have different needs in the community for the chaplains to show up at calls for service that are particularly tragic in nature. Mm-hmm. And anything that helps people to cope and be resilient, I'm all for that.
Anything to add on that, Doctor?
I think I would offer experience through it. One call in particular that I got, we're all on call and we share the call. Some 8 or 9 of us that are in the chaplaincy corps now for an emergency and an accidental drowning at our beach here in the city. And I was called to meet the police at the emergency hospital room. And in that case, we have a policeman that reflects, and this incident triggered some loss in his life. So we were able to support him. Sometimes we like to call it a ministry of presence, just being there sometimes. And on occasions, they may have a question or want to work through something, and we're able to speak with them. In another incident, where we had a fatal accident of a vehicle against a pedestrian, and where I was called out, but it was for the person driving the vehicle in this case that wanted to talk with someone, wanted to connect with someone because of the remorse that they felt for that loss of that person's life. And so we're able to help in those kinds of ways. It's the skill, it's the training that we have that we might bring to the table. And I think that would be, that's a real motivating factor that's practicing what we've learned.
Well, that tragic story you just mentioned brings up my next question, which is there a benefit to the community overall? Is there a greater benefit to the community of the chaplaincy program?
Of course. Anytime that because let me back up a minute. The chaplaincy program is about providing hope and care. It's not about proselytizing and necessarily conveying a religious orientation. Okay, if you don't have this belief system, we can't help you. It's not that at all. Sometimes you just need a guiding hand. You need someone to sit with, to talk to, someone to provide that assistance. And whether it's someone in the building, and we're helping them to go out and do the job and to stay focused on the work, but providing them with the assistance, we have that obligation as far as our internal staff. But equally, as Pastor Joe was talking about, this is also a service that looks externally and provides assistance and support to members of the community who are in need.
Doctor, is there anything in your experience, having been doing this for a while, that has changed your opinion of the police force, or something that enlightened you about their job and how difficult it may be?
Yeah, definitely. I think the compassion for first responders is something that the ordinary citizen does not think of. Those individuals on the front line leave their families every day, and those families, when they say goodbye, they have no idea what they're going to be facing. And I think it brings us a little closer now and bring faith into it. They hit the top of my prayer list, as opposed to, in ordinary circumstances, I'm not thinking about those on duty. But going on ride-alongs with them, just in simple conversations, they're human beings with families, with concerns, and you listen to the stories, and you just learn to appreciate them as people. You see them as people. You learn some names, and all of a sudden it becomes a real reality. So I think that certainly we pray for them.
Did it take you a little while to get comfortable in this role, or is this just an extension of what you've done?
I think it's kind of an extension of what I do and the skill set that I have. I don't think that there was anything to get used to, with an exception of being on call. We rotate on call, and that means anytime, right? So that was a getting used to factor. I got a call on Mother's Day for a call out, and I was in the pulpit at the exact time the call out came, which I couldn't, of course, respond to. But that's the beauty of the chaplaincy and the way in which you set it up, Chief Seabrooks, is that we rotate that call. There are 2 or 3 of us in line for that day. So if you can't get the first one, you go to the second one. And we don't just use senior pastors. So we do have other clergy that are not necessarily in the role of senior pastors, so they can respond.
Chief, we have another question that came in from Twitter, if you don't mind. It's a little bit off topic, but,
Okay.
But I'd love to get it out. With the growing population of Santa Monica, the growing congestion in a lot of the downtown areas, how does the police department handle the increased need for officers and emergency vehicles and first responders, as the doctor mentioned, in such a congested area? Is that something you guys think about, worry about, plan for?
Why, of course. We look at those kinds of decisions through the lens of how are we structured and how are officers deployed on a 24-hour basis, 7 days a week, 365. So very recently we underwent a change in our beat structure so that we could facilitate more rapid response and keep the response times down, because when you're in crisis, seconds count and they matter. Equally, we take a look at how we deploy those resources, and we've taken a look at, this philosophy of putting cops on dots, as they say, or using the data to assist us in the deployment of our resources. So we do that. And we've actually made adjustments, not so much recently, but we've made adjustments in the shift patterns to be sure that during the highest points of the day we have the most officers working, things like that. So we certainly take that into consideration. And then as part of our conversations with the policymakers, we talk about what's the appropriate size of the police department given the demand load that we have, both in terms of calls for service, in terms of crime, in terms of our vacancy rates, things like that, to be sure that with all of the things that make for this robust community, we have a police department that is capable of responding to the vast majority of circumstances that would occur in town. And we do that. We do exactly that.
And so, just in a scenario where there's very dense traffic on maybe a busy Saturday afternoon or a holiday weekend, can emergency vehicles still get through?
Oh, absolutely, and we have this little thing called lights and sirens.
People get out of the way.
It's a little more difficult because it's a little more dense, but people still know to get out of the way. And they know that when we put those on, we're not putting them on for show, we're putting them on because we need to cut through traffic because we have somewhere very important to go. But we also, don't just rely on that, and that's what speaks to the deployment plans. That's what speaks to how we staff with officers, and we try to make sure that in those dense areas, we have officers who use alternative transportation means. So they may be on foot, they may be on bicycles, things like that, or on motorcycles, so that they can maneuver through the density of traffic. And then in the less dense areas, we can rely on our traditional vehicle patrols to get through.
Another Twitter question, you just kind of touched on it as far as staffing and the amount of staff that you have. This tweet said, first of all, Chief, thank you for your service. That's from the Twitter. And then how many, do you have enough police officers on staff? Are you adding more? And how many does it take to keep Santa Monica safe?
Well, we're currently staffed at 224. I am going to be going before the council in the near term to talk about an addition of staff because we need to have additional staff to make up less about growing the department exponentially because we realize there might be some questions about sustainability with that, but to ensure that when we are talking about the number of officers that we have, we're talking about the number of officers that we have, not the number of officers that we have less a percentage who are out because they're injured or on other long-term absences. So the city's policymakers have been very amenable to enabling us to overhire relative to our budgeted amount to ensure that we have the number of officers that it takes to keep this 8 square mile city safe.
Fantastic. Back to the chaplaincy program, if I could, Doctor. So in your assessment, is the chaplaincy program successful at SMPD? And I'd love to hear from both of you on this. Has it been successful?
I think it's immensely successful on both sides. And the reason I say that is from the chaplaincy side, as chaplains, we have such a strong group and we frequently meet and we're able to share what we feel is going on in the community from the communities that we serve as we meet with the chief and her staff. And then she's able to share with us what's coming up into the community and what we should be paying careful attention to. Another dynamic that I think is awesome is that just recently the chaplains have started doing workshops, very short workshops on key subjects, like for instance, Chaplain Steve Snook did a workshop on relationships. And we have another workshop coming up by Chaplain Zach, and that's on forgiveness. And we do these workshops for the PD in their roll call. So they've invited us in, and it's a wonderful opportunity just to, again, not from a faith perspective as much, but from the perspective of let's be aware of how to improve our relationships, not just with community and police, but with husband and wife, with girlfriend, boyfriend, with other officers, with people you generally meet. So these kind of human, emotional needs are also being met. So I think that there's, it's exciting for us as chaplains. I'll just say this, we hate to lose this wonderful police chief that we have. She's a jewel in this city to start this program. We were so concerned about it, but she's made it very clear that this is an institution, and it's great. We love being a part of it. I think if you just sat and talked with any of the chaplains, they would all have the same feeling about it.
And Chief, the officers, the people on your staff, do they like the program?
Yes, they do. And cops are an interesting bunch. We are. Some of us jump right in, 100% full speed ahead. Others sit back and kind of watch from afar. And I think those who have watched from afar have put their toe in the water, and I've heard nothing but good things. And alternatively, I think it's also good that even as of today, we welcomed a new member to our chaplaincy. So it's wonderful to be able to say that even after 5 years, we're still growing the program. And I envision that it will probably be 50 members moving forward over time. I really think that there's a need, there's a desire, and there's an interest. And so with that in mind, we have nowhere to go but up.
Fantastic. And so I find it interesting, so the chaplains have a group and they support each other and help each other as well, right?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Out of that chaplaincy group, also, the chief has a clergy council that meets exclusively with the chief for the purpose, again, of talking about issues in community from the perspective. So it's kind of a gradation of how it's set up. I think it's just a wonderful concept. Every city should have it.
Every city doesn't have it, though.
No, every city does not, and I hope that this can stand as, our motto is the benchmark for excellence. I hope that this is one of those programs that can reflect that benchmark for excellence, and that other police departments will take a look at this and see the value in it, because it's important not only for the troops but for the community, and then also for the clergy members themselves.
Yeah.
Fantastic. This has been really great, you guys, but I want to ask you one more, Chief.
Okay.
Of all the TV shows about law and order and law enforcement, which is your favorite and why?
What's my favorite and why?
Or which is the most realistic? Because some of them don't seem very realistic to me.
Yeah, if I really have to pick one, I'm going to go with The Wire. It's not a new program.
HBO series.
It's the
from a few
HBO
years ago.
series,
Very
yes.
good.
Because, they dealt with issues that are very real in ways that really police officers would deal with these issues. And there was something with everything. Speaking of the relationship components, within families, the officer relationships, detectives to, police officers, the rank and file to with the brass. I mean, there were a lot of different and competing stories. Some of the stories were a little, over the top, but that's what makes for good entertainment. But on the whole, I really enjoyed The Wire, and point of fact, I was watching it the other day on Amazon Prime.
Oh, yeah. It won a lot of awards. Chief Seabrooks, Dr. Matoyer, thank you both very much. This has been a fantastic episode. Great information. Keep up the wonderful work that both of you do to support our community. We're all grateful for that. But unfortunately, we are out of time. So thank you so much. And again, if you guys will come back, we'd love to have you back for another episode. I know you'll be back.
Of course.
Okay, let's do it before the end of summer, hopefully, if we can. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. If you'd like, you can follow Chief Seabrooks on Twitter at Santa Monica COP for Chief of Police. And we'll see you again soon for another episode of Ask the Chief.